Welcome to Crash Course in Commercial Real Estate. We converted our in-house training program to a podcast to teach you prospecting, negotiation, business planning, and other fundamental skills to become a successful commercial real estate agent. And now, here's your host, Brady Collier.
Welcome back. We're here for a bonus round on negotiation. We just finished up negotiation 2, and as soon as we closed it out, Kyle said, there's 2 or 3 things that we need to hit before we go on that Shannon really needs to know. And so one of those was when you're negotiating, recognizing who's in the position of power. And so Kyle, speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so every piece of real estate and every tenant has a certain level of desirability, and that's going to depend on For a location, it's going to depend on the quality of the location, the demand, how many other products they are like that product type. And you have to determine what you have when you're going to list something to market. And in negotiation, you have to realize if you have something that everybody loves to have, you're in a position of power. And so you'll see when someone's listing something for sale, in that type of environment, they may do a call for offers. They may say, this is hitting the market, you have this much time to submit an offer, and people bring their offers in because you're in power. Bring your best offer, best and final.
Oh, so after they get all the offers, they get in 10 or 15 offers, they'll choose the best 3 and say, hey, you've been selected for best and final. Go ahead and submit your best offer. And everybody in there sharpens their pencil, goes back, they increase their price, they shorten their due diligence period, they put up more earnest money or whatever. They really want the deal. And so in that case, the seller has some asset, some multifamily property in downtown Dallas that everybody in the world wants. They're in the position of power, and so it's all on their terms. Right. The negotiations are.
Yeah, and market conditions is part of that too. What is the market like? And right now in 2021, somehow, it seems to be incredibly competitive in most asset types. There's just a lot of buyers. There's a lot of tenants looking to expand, and there's not as many sellers and there's not as much inventory on the market. And so knowing that as a broker is incredibly important. On the other side of that, if you have a 100,000 square foot, 2-story Sears box in Lubbock, Texas, which you might be able to see behind us, you need to recognize that there aren't many suitors for that type of box. And so you need to be courting tenants appropriately, you need to be able to assess, your looks and what your candidates out there look like.
Yeah. Call
and
Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. There's just not much for that type of asset. And so when you're negotiating with a tenant, you're going to be more accommodating. What do you need? What type of deal works? And you're almost more of a suitor going out trying to pursue and find somebody and court them and bring them into the property. And so when you're negotiating, and I've dealt with landlords this way, they just don't understand what they have on both sides. They might not know how desirable their box is, and I get in early before it goes out to market and take advantage of that.
Okay, let me give an example of that, if I may. Mm-hmm. Several years ago, Grant and I went and we talked to some local business people at the corner of 191 and 250 in Midland, Texas. Little did we know it was the best piece of real estate potentially still available in Midland, Texas. And there was a box company there. We tore it down. Well, who is the first person that we talked to about? Chick-fil-A. Who has the power in this negotiation? Chick-fil-A or Brady Collier in Lubbock, Texas?
Well, at that point, you would think Chick-fil-A.
I thought Chick-fil-A had all the power. Little did I know, I had way more power in that negotiation than I thought I had. Yeah. Chick-fil-A took, and they're great, and the guy that represented them was great, and we have great relationships. They totally won the negotiation because I thought they had all the power. They would have signed a ground lease with me. They would have done anything for that site. I could have taken out to 10 other people and gotten the site done, but I thought they had all the power, and so I did the deal on their terms, not realizing that I had the best site in Midland, Texas. So,
but it was still a win-win.
It was a win-win.
Yeah.
I have no regret.
That's a good example.
Yeah. No, that's a great example, and I could go through pieces of property that weren't marketed properly like that we went in and just got an incredible price on because they didn't know what they had, or a site that's coming vacant, but before they can market it, we get in there and negotiate. And so, again, knowledge is power, and if you know more about the demand and know more about the property, it's going to help your negotiation. But knowing your position and being willing to say to your client, hey, this is an incredibly competitive environment, and I know you want that extra dollar off your rent, or you want that extra few $100,000 in TI, but you're going to lose the deal. And so being able to recognize that, communicate to your client, and it almost seems like you're not negotiating, but you're helping them get the deal and realizing how you can negotiate or who you're negotiating against.
Say you're representing a restaurant, for example, and there's two sites. Site A is amazing, the corner of Main and Main. High traffic, high density, great demographics. But it's several dollars a foot more expensive than Site B. Site B is it's cheaper, and your client's like, oh man, I told myself I wasn't for my rent. I was not going to spend more than X dollars. One thing, Grant, my partner, he often will go back and say, hey, let's just look at your business. With this traffic, with this demographics, how many food items are you going to sell? Is the real thing you're worried about your absolute rent figure, or is the real thing you're worried about your rent as a percentage of your total sales? And he just helps his clients open up their minds to their own reality. And in so doing, he helps them get to what he already knows is the best decision for them. And so, as he said, Paul Stell, one of my mentors, says that you make money in commercial real estate through information arbitrage. When you know more than everybody else, you hold a lot of power. And so that's knowing the market and helping your clients know what they have. And sometimes what they have is not desirable, and they think there's a client who's got a building right behind us on the other side of the mall. They think it's a legacy asset. It's terrible access, and they're going to hold it for decades if they don't come to reality. And the broker representing them has to help bring them to reality, or they will never get a deal done.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. And communicating what you know to the other side of the transaction to get them there. I mean, I'm thinking of a meeting at ICSC, which is a conference where you go and make deals and sit across from people to negotiate and move deals forward. And we were negotiating for 3 or 4 months and couldn't get there on the rent with a landlord. But we sat there across from each other, and I just had to bring to the forefront the reality of this 30,000 square foot box or retail space that had no co-tenancy. When I say co-tenancy, that means other tenants that are desirable to be next to. And that's really important. When I'm getting off topic, but you'll see all the fashion, soft good users lined up together, or you see grocery anchored and people that chase grocery, or you see Walmart and people chase Walmart. Well, this box was by itself. And so that eliminates a lot of suitors, a lot of potential tenants. So I had to bring to the forefront to the reality of this very sophisticated real estate developer and owner. Hey, there just aren't options for you here. Who else are you going to lease this box to? And then he just had to say, you're right. We don't have the demand, and it helps bridge that gap. But knowing we were in a position there of power, he didn't have many other options. So we could drill in and negotiate harder, not
and we talked about
contentious.
We talked about not over negotiating, but knowing your position helps you not over negotiate. Because if you're the agent who thinks your client has this, gold piece of real estate and it's really not that great, and you could over negotiate for a high rent, never get there, lose the assignment, next broker takes it, puts it at a real reality market rate, and they're going to get the deal done, not you.
Right.
So that helps you not over negotiate, being informed on where you're at.
Yeah, and when to use that knowledge to your advantage and not let them in on that, and when to use that information to tell them, to bring them into that knowledge that you have to help them see things the way that
and
you
you've
do
been
to
talking
get the
about
deal
client negotiations, but with brokers, it's the same way,
Mm-hmm.
where a broker from out of town may be negotiating a certain way and say, hey, let me just send you some market data that we've assembled in the market. You send it over to them, and it opens their eyes because they know it's real. They can look it up in LoopNet or CoStar, Crexie, or wherever,
Yeah.
and confirm it. And they're like, oh, wow, this really is the market. And so
Right.
that can be used with agents as well as landlords, tenants, clients.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about one more thing quickly, and that is closing. And so you're going back and forth on negotiations. You don't want your client to get negotiation fatigue. Let's talk about how to close the negotiations out. How do you land the plane?
And I'm smiling because I'm thinking of one of the very first meetings. I don't know if you remember this, but I was brand new in the business, never done a commercial real estate transaction, but had sold alarm systems for years, which is I meet you and I close the transaction. If I don't close the transaction then and there, it's not happening. I mean, it goes down to 10%. And so we go to a meeting with a tenant on a shopping center on a 2,000 square foot space, on a shopping center that Wheelhouse Development was developing, and we sit down and we have a great conversation. They're interested, want to do it, and we leave, And I'm like flabbergasted. I was like, you didn't have a lease with you? Like, I was so ignorant, but I was like, you don't have a lease ready for him to sign? He's ready to make something happen.
For those of you who don't know, lease documents in our industry is like 50 to 60 pages. I mean,
right.
that would be
that are negotiated over a month at
months
least.
with attorneys on both sides. It's
Right.
a huge process.
But that doesn't mean that you aren't closing all the time. Not to be,
And that
cliche,
there's not one huge hard closing.
well, there is, but not only,
That's
exclusively. Right. Yeah. And so you're always closing, always be closing. And that looks like little decisions along the way, creating buy-in, creating them to buy into the site. And so I'm not going to get somebody to go from initial conversation to signing a lease in a day. Now, you might on a 1,200 square foot space. There are exceptions to that on smaller transactions with local tenants where you'll get stuff done immediately. But generally speaking, commercial real estate, it's little steps along the way, and each one's to be celebrated as a close. You get them to agree to an LOI. You've closed. You're not paid, but you've moved the deal forward. And so deals oftentimes get caught, and time kills deals. Every day, every week. I'm amazed dealing with landlords how often we don't get responses for weeks and weeks or months and months, and that just causes deals to die a natural death. And so closing in commercial real estate looks like moving the deal forward every day, every opportunity you can, pushing it towards the finish line and creating buy-in and getting buy decisions made by the other side.
And agents who can't move a deal from 60 pages, which is overwhelming, to the salient points, 10 points. Okay, now we've got agreement on, Kyle's the best at this. Hey, we have agreement on 7 of those points. Here's the 3 things we have left. And the attorney's working on the lease or the purchase and sale agreement or whatever. So he's just keeping it high level, and he's closed 7 deal points for us. Now there's 3 points left. We need to do this and this and this. If we can get those 3, we're ready to execute the deal. So simplifying in terms of moving the deal towards a closing. There's a lot of agents out there. They're great at discussing things. They're great at rapport. They're great at relationship, but they struggle to move a client towards a final decision, which is best for the client and really is best for you. If you think about a waiter at a restaurant, they get paid on a few things: total ticket size, how good their service is, but what's the other thing?
How many tables they turn.
How many tables they turn. That's exactly
I was
right.
a waitress.
You were a
Yes.
waitress. Okay. A waitress who can turn tables tactfully is going to make way more. If you turn 25 tables in a night as opposed to 18, you're going to make that much percentage more. And so the same way in commercial real estate, you got to be able to bring deal. You got to be able to land the plane. Mm-hmm. And it's not one event. It's a lot of events that get it closer and closer over the course of the deal.
Yeah, and we talked about this on an early episode, but solving those problems along the way. So it's moving it forward, and then it's not a straight line towards the close. Something bad happens and you bring it back to life. And so, yeah, I think in talking about negotiation, it's so important to keep in mind the end goal, which is getting the deal closed. But that can be a crippling thought. You have to celebrate each close along the way, each week, every time you move a deal forward, towards the next stage, it's to be celebrated and part of the negotiation.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so Shannon, do you have any questions on position of power and closing the deal?
I do. I have a question. When you are closing, you talked about you keep moving it forward.
Yeah.
What is the fine balance of moving it forward without being obnoxious and calling the other broker too much, or how do you balance that?
Yeah, and I'm borderline obnoxious at times, but every situation and type of deal is different. So it's not a black and white answer of, you call once a week, you email once a week, or twice a month. There's not a right or wrong. I think it's perceiving what pushing is appropriate and what will actually move the deal forward. And what stage you're in of the negotiation. So if I'm initiating the first steps of negotiation, bringing an offer, I don't probably want to seem overeager. I don't want to seem to want the site too much. I don't want to seem desperate, and so you have to manage that appropriately. Then when you get into negotiations, I had one where I'm just trying to get a real estate committee approval. So we have an LOI fully negotiated, and we need it done. So I'm pinging the guy every day, but the deal's fully negotiated at that point. There's several things we're trying to tie up, and the squeaky wheel gets grease, they say. And so you just want to constantly be that squeaky wheel. How good is your relationship? So there's not a right or wrong answer. And I think we talked about this, the ability to, social discernment is what you called it. And you might have been about to speak to that, but socially discerning. Yeah.
If you just send a lease to them and it's 60 pages and they're sending it to their attorney, it's going to take them weeks to get it to their attorney,
Right.
dialogue with their attorney. The attorney's going to redline the entire lease. It's going to look like he bled all over it with a red pen. And so if you're pinging them every day during that process, they'd be really frustrated. But after you get first round of comments back or something like that, so you'll just get used to saying, okay, this is going to take a few weeks. But then whenever you only have 1 or 2 deal points, and then you send it to them and say, hey, I just need to update my client. When do you think you'll be able to be back with me? And they're like, I'll turn around in a day or 2. Okay, sounds good. I'll give you a call. So you're getting permission to follow up in a day or 2. Real soft permission. Hey, just want to follow up on behalf of my client. Make sure y'all are progressing. When can I expect that back? And they know they told you 2 days and you called 2 days later.
And you might be able to create another reason to call somebody. So I called somebody today because I saw they owned a shopping center. And maybe I was interested in that shopping center, but it was another excuse to call them, not directly related to my deal. So I called them and said, hey, is this Best Buy or Bed Bath & Beyond going to close? Is space coming available? Oh, I'll look into it. I'll see when their leases are expiring. Awesome, great. Hey, what's the status of those lease comments? And he probably knew what I was doing.
While I've got you on the phone.
Yeah, exactly. It's at least a little less abrasive. So,
Or you have your first letter of intent. And
Yes.
I think for me, as being new, is I just submitted it, and so now it's the waiting, and I don't know. I haven't heard back. So when do you call to check on it?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm sitting right now. Is what's appropriate.
Yeah, and I remember when early on, those few deals as you start, you have 1 deal you're working on, then 2, then 3. They're like your babies.
Yes.
You don't want to set it down, and you want to rock it, and you want to feed it, and you want to take care of it. And then at some point you're like Brady here, and you have 5 kids and they're all doing stuff, and I have no idea what they're up to, but they're taking care of it and the deal's moving forward. Like, you get busy. And so the person on the other side, that deal might be important. They might be working on it, but they have 50 deals they're working on, not 1. And so just remembering that and how you follow up, spacing it out a little bit. You do need to remind them and ping them. So don't hear me say don't do that.
For sure.
Because an appropriate push goes a long way. But the question is great because it shows you're thinking about it the right way. I don't want to be obnoxious. I want to move my deal forward. What's the balance? And if you always keep that in mind and discern the relationship, I think you'll make the right decision.
Okay.
Yeah. And you'll get used to it as we go. All righty. Thanks for joining us.